Welcome back. You've probably spent the first little bit working on your blog and exploring possibilities for what you can and cannot complete. We're going to bring the discussion back now to good web design and good pedagogy. For blogs and web design, I want to make a point first relating back to our conversation about Web 2.0 in Unit 1, and then make a point that I think will resonate with many of you. The first is that with web design, before Web 2.0 used to mean something very, very different. There were guidelines that were written up as far as the number of colors and where to place things and the size of images and on and on and on. And if you go Google principles of good web design, you'll find lists and lists that people have they've posted and opined about how what these principles could be. With Web 2.0, and in particular when you get into blogs and wikis, it really changed the playing field when it comes to web design. Number one, because you had in some ways more control and in other ways less control over the environment, the online environment. But what I want to argue, and that's the point you'll see right here on this slide, is that you already know what good web design is, and you can know it down just inside and instinctively when you go and you visit a web page. We are going to go look at some poorly designed sites and some not poorly designed sites, but you'll be able to trust your gut when you start looking at sites. And the hardest thing for you will be to make sure you you're able to step back and look at your own blog to see if your blog's adhering to generally accepted principles of good web design. So let's go and let's take a look at some of those sites right now. We're going to start off by looking at some bad web design before we talk about actual good web design. If you go to Google and you type in poorly designed websites or bad web design, you will inevitably get to a web page called webpagesthatsuck.com. Now, while I don't necessarily endorse the name of the page, they are one of the highest ranking pages when it comes to ranking poor web design. You can see as I scroll just really quickly down here, there are tons of these sites, and not only do they link to these web pages, but they give commentary, and sometimes it is tongue-in-cheek commentary, and you have to take some of it with a grain of salt. But other commentary is actually very, very, very thoughtful, and I want to show you just two quick examples that I pulled from this web page. The first is the Evolution and the Nature Science Institutes. And before you think this is just way out in left field, this is off of indiana.edu over, and so this is a pretty prominent website. And if you take a look up here and hold on, I'm going to scroll really quickly. There's a lot of information on this page, but that in effect is the number one problem with this web design. There's a huge amount of scrolling. Another that you'll go ahead and then jump out will be the number of colors. There's a lot of colors up here, different fonts. In general, you'll see these lines right here. Tables are generally frowned upon now. Images that don't have any alt tags. An alt tag is when you roll over an image, a piece of text will pop up. So, in general, not a very good website, not a good design. And another page that that they pulled from, it's the Georges Township Civil Defenses and EMS, but this was their web page. Don't use backdrop pictures. While it makes sense why they chose that picture, they chose red text to put on top of it, making it very difficult to read, and as well as putting additional images on top of there. Just a really interesting page. I pulled a quick article on some essentials of good web design just as a jumping off point, and I'll put this link down below in our resources because this will serve a nice way to frame our conversation about good web design. Good web design is at its best extremely subjective, and it depends on who you are and what your proclivities are. For instance, I am partially red-green colorblind, so I don't appreciate pages where there is lots of text that are colors that I can get mixed up very easily. In particular, on a computer, it's red and black. But that's a very personal thing just for me, and I don't expect all websites to be designed for me. But case in point, let's take a look. The very first principle they say is precedence in guiding the eye. This is one of those things that, again, I would say is extremely subjective about picking and choosing where you place things and following how what traditionally the human eye, the path of the human eye follows. I'll let you take a look at that a little bit more, and they also have examples on this webpage which you may want to check out. Spacing. This would be the problem with one of the problems with this page. There's just a lot of information and a lot of not a lot of space. Use a lot of space. A lot of times more spacing is better than more content per page or more things per page. They call it white space. And there's another example right here. Number 3, make sure you have very clear navigation. Make sure your user knows exactly what they need to do and where they need to go. If not, they're not going to want to return to your site. Design to build, which they're going to talk about the specifics of what you need to do and if you have the know-how to get across what you want to get across. Typography. Be very careful in your font choices and in your spacing, your sizing, your coloring, and that you are consistent throughout your page. Make sure that your site is usable and that it adheres to accessibility standards, and that you're meeting the needs of the clients or the customers or the publics that are going to be visiting your page. Alignment. This is an overall, but it's very much similar to some of the other principles about where you place things and where the human eye likes things in space and color. Clarity, sharpness. This is kind of would get back to right here. If we're looking at this, these pictures are just not very good quality, and one of the things they argue for is a clarity, a sharpness, an attention to detail with your images. And a final one is consistency, and this is just true across the board with many projects. Be consistent. If you're going to have a certain size font for your heading, make that true throughout. Or if you're going to have a color for your background, make that consistent throughout all of your pages. One of the things that makes web design a little bit easier is with Web 2.0 is it eliminates many of the features that while you can make a space more your own, it automatically meets many of these principles of good web design.